Alrighty, y'all. Houses, architecture. That's what we're talking about today. We're looking at the UK versus Australia when it comes to architecture, home designs, things like that. We're going to be comparing them. This is a video from Dreaming of Down Under. That's the channel. It'll be linked down in the description so you can watch the whole thing uninterrupted and check them out. This is a Discord suggestion from Charles-Jack. So let's jump right into this. Homes and architecture, I think, are very interesting. I love variations in them. You know, the different materials are, the way they're built, how much they cost. I think it's all very interesting, especially when we're talking about different countries. So let's take a look at this, see how it compares to what I'm used to. And at the end, I will show you a couple different variations that I've seen in different parts of the U.S. Let's go.
I'm Lisa from Australian travel and migration blog dreamingofdownunder.com. Today I'm going to run through some of the differences between houses in the UK and houses in Australia. I grew up in the UK, but I've also house sat in around 100 homes in Sydney over the last few years, and I've noticed quite a lot of differences between homes in each country.
Very cool.
There will be variations across Australia because the climate varies so much, but these are the things I've noticed in Sydney homes. If you're interested in moving to Australia from the UK or vice versa, here's what to expect in your new home. So the first difference between houses in Australia and the UK is that in the UK you tend to have a whole row of houses along a road that have the same design repeated over and over, whereas in Australia you can have every house on a road being completely different.
Okay, so first point right away. USA would be more like Australia. Yeah, as you can see, every house could be a little bit different or totally different, whereas look at that in the UK, similar, almost exact same in this shot all down the block. So that's the first difference.
I think this is due to people buying land in Australia and then having a home built on it, rather than people buying existing homes like they do in the UK.
Okay.
Some of the older housing in Australia is repetitive, like the old terraces and federation homes that you have in Sydney, but generally you've got a really wide variation of housing styles along the same street.
Right.
Another difference is that houses in Australia usually have a veranda across the front of the house, and this creates shade across the front window, and it's also quite a nice feature because people put chairs and benches on them that face out into the street. In the UK it's more common to have a front porch if you've got space, so this is just a small glass room on the front of your front door basically where you store shoes and umbrellas and things, but they do get quite hot if they're in the sun, so it wouldn't really work in Australia.
Yeah. Imagine how hot that front part, like the UK style, would get in Australia. As she mentioned, Australia, especially around Sydney, can get really hot, so I understand why that's not as common there. But yeah, same here in the US. You could see both of those depending on where you're at, so very interesting. Although the veranda style, you don't see as much. I think those are kind of cool. I wish they were more common. They're kind of neat.
Look up at the roofs on Australian houses, you'll see that the eaves overhang the house much more than in the UK, and this creates shade against the windows. In the UK the eaves are really small and you get as much light as possible against the windows and as much warmth from the sun.
Okay, so
the windows
right away you could see very heavy focus on shade, sun protection in Australia homes. Kind of no surprise, right? Especially around what she's focusing on, probably Sydney area or some of the hotter parts of Australia. It gets super hot. It's very sunny. That southern hemisphere sun is like insanely strong from what I've heard from you guys. So yeah, no surprise that shade and, you know, trying to keep total sun exposure under control is a focus. That's definitely no surprise.
Themselves are different between Australian and British homes. So in Australia, in the older homes, you'll often have wooden framed sash windows, and in the newer homes, you'll have big metal frames around your windows and they'll slide open sideways rather than opening outwards. In the UK, you have nearly always double glazing, which you don't seem to have in Australia, and you normally have the thick plastic frames and windows that open outwards. You also have a layer of mesh, which is called a screen, over Australian windows, so that when you open them, flies and insects can't come in.
Yeah. That's smart.
In Australia, it's really common to have a screen door, which means that when you open your front or back door, you have a second door next to it, which is usually made of mesh, and that just means you can keep the door open, have the breeze coming through, but no insects can come in as long as you keep the screen door closed.
Again, very
In Australia,
smart.
It's really common to have a separate laundry room or utility room for your washing machine. In the UK, unless you've got a large house, you normally have to have your washing machine in the kitchen. I don't think...
What? In the kitchen? Now that's different. I've personally never ever seen that, ever. It may exist in the US, although I highly doubt it. I've just never seen it. Australia seeming like more like the US. Not saying they're the same, but a lot of these tendencies are similar between Australia and the US that I'm seeing, rather than the UK tends to be more unique in this video so far. Different than Australia and the US. So yeah, U.S. again, you're going to see laundry rooms or laundry rooms in the basement, first floor, whatever the case is. Yeah, definitely like this way more.
Sometimes in older flats they might have a communal laundry, but most of the apartments I've been in have had a separate laundry room inside the apartment. In Australia,
Same.
it's really common to have open plan houses, so the living room,
Yes.
dining room and kitchen are all basically one open room, whereas in the UK your kitchen is nearly always separate, and then your living room and dining room sometimes are knocked through, but it's normally separate rooms.
Gotcha.
In Australia, it's much more common to live in a bungalow or a one-storey house than two-storey houses, whereas
Right.
in the UK, bungalows are quite scarce and usually something that older people go for because they don't have stairs.
Yeah.
If you do have a two-storey house in Australia, it can get really, really hot up on the second floor if you don't have aircon.
I can vouch for that. Unfortunately, right now in Illinois, we have a two-story house, and the second floor is really stuffy, really, really hot. It's like night and day difference. It really is weird compared to the main floor. And then, of course, in New Mexico, we had what we call ranch, which is a single floor home. So just that, no basement there, no second floor. So it's just one floor. That's it. Whereas here in Illinois, we have 2 stories plus we have a basement. So it's really 3 floors if you think about it. So totally different, yeah. But you see both here. You do see a lot of 2 stories. That's cool to hear that those aren't super common in Australia because, like I said, overall, I'm not a fan of 2 stories. I prefer one level. I think it's just easier. But then again, in the UK, I'm also not surprised to hear they have a lot of 2 stories because you have to remember, we're dealing with a lot less land than you would have in Australia. Australia is huge. And of course, even compared to the US, again, the US is huge. So in countries that are a little smaller, you got to make more use of your room.
In the UK, you have a letterbox on your front door, so basically a little hole in your front door, whereas in Australia, you have a standalone letterbox that's out facing onto the street.
Yep. Same with the US,
One of
like
the
Australia.
biggest complaints that I hear from expats in Australia is how cold the houses get in Australia in the winter. So since Australian houses are built to stay cool, they're very often much colder inside than a British house would be in the same temperature. So generally in the daytime, it's colder inside the house in Australia than outside, whereas in the UK, it's the opposite. It's nearly always warmer inside your house than outside.
Right. Gotcha.
One house I stayed in, it had a plug-in heater that had the temperature on, and when I woke up in the mornings, it was usually about 9 degrees inside. So having central heating throughout your house is really rare in Australia, and if people do have it, it's usually through air vents rather than the radiators on the wall like we have in the UK.
Okay.
What some houses have in Australia is a standalone gas heater that's attached to a gas pipe either coming out of the floor or the wall. You can also buy small oil heaters in Australia that you plug in if you just want to heat at one room.
Right. Gotcha.
Having a fire on the wall in the living room isn't very common in Australia. I have seen it in a few houses, but very few compared to the UK.
That's interesting.
Some of the older houses in Australia quite often have chimney breasts and really nice original fireplaces, but they're not really used as much as they are in the UK.
So the UK still uses a lot of those. I think that's actually kind of cool. I would say it's about 50-50 here. You do see older homes with fireplaces is much more common. And then some newer homes go for them too, but not all of them, right? It's really just depends.
Obviously, aircon is more common in Australia than in the UK, but not as many houses have it in Sydney as I expected, actually. So looking at the back of the houses, in Australia it's also common to have a veranda on the back of the house as well as the front. Or if you don't have a veranda, there's usually some kind of solid covering that shades the patio. Whereas in the UK, you would rarely have a covering over your patio. You'd try and get as much light and heat as possible.
Okay.
And
that's, of course, relates to climate difference, right? UK isn't known for being scorching hot most of the year, right? That's just not the case. Australia is very hot a lot of the year, so that's pretty easy to see. Really cool landscaping in this picture. I love the tropical feel, the lushness of that Australian picture, really neat. But I appreciate this really clean look in this UK picture as well. Although I must say it does seem like the trend from what I've seen that, yeah, most people here, even in the U.S., whether you're here in Chicago or down in New Mexico, again, I say these just because that's my living experience in both, which are radically different climates. Still, it was both had coverings in the backyard. That's just more common because, you get a lot of sunlight here and it's pretty strong. So Yeah, definitely leaning more towards Australia style, I suppose.
Batteries also don't seem to exist in Australia, so this is basically an extension on the back of your house that's usually made of glass. And these are really common in the UK, but I don't think that would be possible in Australia with the heat.
Gotcha. That's kind of cool though. I like
Having
that.
a swimming pool in your back garden is obviously much more common in Australia than it is in the UK. It's not as common as I thought it would be actually, although I would think going further north where it's hotter it's probably more common to have a swimming pool.
Up in Queensland, I bet.
The bathrooms in Australia are quite different to in the UK. So in the UK you can't have plug sockets in your bathroom normally. And
really?
In Australia, you always have plug sockets. This is apparently due to some difference with the electrical systems in Australian houses.
Kidding.
That means it's safe to have sockets in bathrooms where it can get wet.
Yeah, we definitely have sockets in the bathroom here in the U.S., everywhere I've seen. Really interesting. I did not know it. That's why videos like this are fun, especially when you're dealing with homes, right? You know, something you interact with every day. Very, very interesting to learn the differences in different countries when it comes to odds and ends, you know, little things like that. I would have never known that. Very interesting.
Also, the light switches are different in Australia. So in the UK, in your bathroom, you always have a pull cord so that you don't have to touch a switch if you're wet.
Okay.
And
That's
in Australia,
clever.
It's just a normal light switch.
Yeah.
And they also nearly always have fans in the bathroom. So you'll have a switch with the light on, the fan on, and occasionally also a heat switch where you have heated light bulbs.
Wow.
This is a
That's
strange
different.
little difference, but in Australia, the side of bathtubs are nearly always solid, so they're quite often tiled, whereas in the UK, you tend to have a plastic panel. And I remember an Australian friend saying that she went to Wales and found this really strange because she'd never seen that before. Also,
Yeah.
sinks in Australia, you nearly always have a cupboard underneath the sink in the bathroom,
Yes.
which we call a vanity.
Same here.
In the UK, it's more common just to have a sink on a stand.
Yeah, that's
In
definitely
Australia,
different.
they also have a few differences with household terminology. So what we call a sofa or a settee in the UK, Australians would call a lounge.
Really?
And what we
Yeah, sofa, couch would be the most common. So I guess towards the UK, lounge room. That could go either way here. Bedding, Manchester in Australia. That's different. Duvet or Duna, flat unit. And flats or units, you would mostly hear apartments, I think, here. You may hear unit, rarely. You might even hear flat. I mean, it's not absent here. You do hear it. But, yeah, definitely a lot of these are a little bit different than what I hear.
call a lounge or a living room in the UK, Australians would call the lounge room.
Living room here.
Also, bedding and towels in Australia, they call this Manchester, which is meant to be from the olden days when cotton items had to be imported from Manchester in the UK. Also, a duvet is called a doona in Australia. They do use the word quilt as well, though. A flat or apartment in Australia is called a unit. So in Australia, you can sit on a lounge in the lounge room and then go and get under your Manchester and your doona.
No kidding.
Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments if
So
there are any differences.
there
that
you
I've missed.
go. That was really interesting. Well done video. Some interesting facts. This is a video where I would really, really love to see your comments. Okay, so make sure to leave your comments on this. What did she miss? What would you like to add? Do you disagree with some of these? And most of all, tell me something that you like about maybe UK homes. Maybe you're somewhere else in Europe. What do you like about what your country has for homes? Also, leave suggestions. I would like to do videos where I actually just take a look at homes around the world from different places, see some unique constructions, different housing designs and ideas. We could build upon this a lot. I think this is really, really cool topic, and I love learning this stuff. So much to learn still, even after this, about some UK homes, some European homes, anywhere, African, Asian, Australian, anywhere. I think it's really, really fascinating. As I said earlier, I just want to show you some differences, for example, that you can get in the U.S. Now, of course, I know in Australia you probably have a lot of different housing styles depending on where you're at. Even in the U.K., it depends on what kind of neighborhood, what area, you might see some differences. I'm well aware of that. Let me just show you some differences from my experience living in Northern Illinois, in the gigantic Chicago metro area that is like basically the whole top corner of the state. You have a lot of variation. And then, of course, living in the Southwest, in southern New Mexico, totally different vibe, totally different feel, different construction than here in Illinois, and I think it's very interesting. So we're going to go Las Cruces first, where we lived. Very cool vibe. I actually love these houses. I love the style of these southwestern homes. These are, what you'd find in parts of California, Arizona, maybe Colorado, New Mexico, West Texas, but mostly New Mexico. You'll find like adobe-style homes, Santa Fe-style homes, haciendas, casitas, things like that. So here's an example of a pretty pricey one. As you can see, the mountains in the background, this desert landscaping, really, really cool. And you can see the housing style, big ceilings because it's a very hot environment down there. So it's always high ceilings, trying to get that heat up in the air and keep the house cool. Yeah, you just see a lot of craftsmanship in these New Mexico homes. They're very, very nice. It stood out to me. All these attention to details. Beautiful, beautiful homes that we saw down there. Of course, here's a really expensive one. This is over $1 million. Spectacular, as it should be. I mean, that's crazy expensive. But yeah, you get the idea there. I like the rounded corners, by the way. When two walls meet, they're not a sharp angle. Oh, and by the way, this is some IWrocker trivia. We don't live there anymore, so I feel safe showing this. This is our old house, actually, that we lived in briefly for, 8 or 9 months in New Mexico, right here. So you could see the adobe-style stucco walls. They call it like New Pueblo architecture or something. It's supposed to represent like the old, of course, like pueblos you would see around like Santa Fe and New Mexico, Arizona, that type of deal. And yeah, there it is. So yeah, you could see really big, like ceiling, huge. They were like, I don't know, 15 feet tall or something. A lot of archways, very cool aesthetic. And of course, it had a beautiful view of the mountains, which I think you probably have seen on video from our mount times. You have these nichos, they call them, these cutouts where you could decorate them. Really cool. And yeah, that's a little look at, obviously the house is bare here. This is not, we had it looking a little more spruced up than that. And these were taken in winter, which winter there is great. But, of course, the leaves still do fall down off of the trees. But, yeah, there you go. That's a little trivia for you and a look at some New Mexico architecture. You would see, here's a regular, on the cheaper side, here's a regular house that you would see. This is very common to see in Illinois. Okay, and, great prices here, too. But, of course, the closer you get to Chicago or very high-end suburbs, they go way up. So Chicago can be very expensive, but somewhat affordable, say, compared to like New York or LA. Then you're really crazy expensive. Of course, here's one that's a little more in the same area, 329. As you can see, that's a 2-story, a little more decorated. Looks, has a little more impact on the look. And then obviously this one's pretty nice inside as well. But you can see the differences, right? Different just architecture, right? Not as high of ceilings. And then as you can see, basements. There was just no basements in homes in New Mexico. Obviously, there is in Illinois, so that's a big difference. I personally like having basements. I think they're cool. And it is weird how out west they're just not as common. And then finally, there's another one. You see a lot of siding, brickwork. There's just a lot of different looks. Especially in Illinois, you get these different looks. But of course, you could see the roof style too. You get that typical angled roof look, and I should have mentioned on the New Mexico homes there were a lot of flat roofs. So just these little differences, I think they're very interesting. And that's gonna end it for us. I hope you enjoyed this video, and like I said, I can't wait to see your comments. I would really like to look at homes like we just looked at a few here around Australia, around the UK, around Europe, wherever you're watching from. Give me some ideas. Give me your experiences, your favorite home styles, and stuff like that. Let's talk about it. Throw a like, a thumbs up on this video. I would appreciate it. It would help it out. Of course, you can subscribe to join our amazing community we have here. And we're growing. We're on our way to 100K, so let's go. Finally, check that description for the original video and other ways you can interact with me, support me, stuff like that. My name is Ian. You watch it, IWrocker. Until next time, y'all. Catch you later.